Welcome back. Throughout the last year, people around the country have continuously rallied for police accountability. At the end of March, elected officials gathered in front of City Hall to announce the Community Power Act, a bill that will create an elected civilian review board that would discipline NYPD officers and provide justice for communities that have been unfairly treated. Here to speak with us today is Luis Tejada, a community organizer coordinator from the Elected Civilian Review Board, known throughout the community as ECRB. Luis, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome. So just to start off, can you explain the Community Power Act bill, please?
Yeah, so essentially, the ECRB campaign now has pretty much our legislation is now an act, right, in City Council, New York City Council, which is called the Community Power Act, which is primary sponsors are Council Member Woman Inez Barron and Alika Ampry-Samuels from Brooklyn, New York. And while the bill was introduced, we received new co-sponsors like James G. Van Bramer, Farah and Lewis, Carlos Menchaca, and Kevin C. Riley. So, right, this bill is calling for an elected civilian review board and is also calling for an elected independent prosecutor.
And how did this bill come about? How did you guys decide that this is something that you wanted to start?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so about, I would say, running to 6 years ago, during the killing of, Freddie Gray, right after the Freedom Socialist Party, individual activists, we gather and, we sort of started to speak, besides just, calling Black Lives Matter and protesting all the unjust killings by the cops, what is something that we can call as a community, to actually protect ourselves and, be more proactive in holding police accountable. So we gather and we sort of review the charter, the current charter, right, the Constitution of New York City. And we know, right, that the Civilian Complaint Review Board, which is the existing, government agency that reviews police misconduct, it's really weak. Their complaints, right, have been dwindling down, not because, right, the police is not out there harassing people or killing them, but really because that agency is powerless and very ineffective. It's completely appointed by, the police commissioner and the mayor, and few members are appointed by the city council. Right, that board, the CCRB, also has no binding power. They only give recommendations. So we wanted to make something very different, which is calling for empowering and also for district elected board members, right, that can be accountable to the community, that actually know their community, that we holding them accountable to do monthly meetings in which they can not only get complaints but also hear out the community on what is the relationship between with the police and the community, and to be more proactive in addressing police corruption.
And so you mentioned there are two different boards. There's the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and then there's the Elected Civilian Review Board that is brought up through the Community Power Act. And you kind of went into it, but can you explain some of those main differences and how civilians can participate in either of those and how they work together?
Yeah, so the ECRB is not yet an existing body. It's like an aspiration, actually like, a political call, right, reform. So we want to get rid of the CCRB and replace it, right, with the ECRB, with all the main points that it's in our legislation, which, right, is also, we want also undocumented people that have ID, NYC ID to be part of the board, right? So that's just an example of like our demands. So essentially, right, we are competing, right? We are trying to have a solution, right? Give New York City a solution for more accountability, because the CCRB, right, was created to do that, but has not been nowhere close in providing accountability to the community, because, right, the way it's written in the legislation, the charter, is written that members are appointed and the members are only to provide recommendations. And, right, our campaign is calling that the members should not be appointed; they should be elected within their districts, and that they are not to provide recommendations, but are to make binding decisions. Once they have give the due process to the police officers and find evidence that the police officer acted, inappropriately, or it did any misconduct.
And let's take a closer look at that elected civilian review board. It's supposed to it says it's supposed to discipline NYPD officers while also providing justice for communities that have been treated unfairly. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that process?
Yeah. So the part of justice, right? We have a lot of families like Miss Juanita Young, mom of Mark and Ferguson, Mr. Basso, Father Saeed Basso, and others who, their cases didn't get a fair shot either by the district attorney nor by the CCRB. Their cases where the police officers are still working. Right, we have a great example just recently, right, with Chauvin and the killing of George Floyd, which is very similar to, in a way, to the killing of Eric Garner, right, by Officer Pantaleo. Both of these officers had numerous complaints, right, close to a dozen complaints of, Eric Chauvin did the same to a kid. He put his knees. Fortunately, the kid didn't die. But right, it went to a different level, right, with George Floyd, and he did die. Right, it was actual, plain murder. But of course, right, the district attorneys, regardless of all these complaints, neither the respective CCRBs, here in New York City and also in Minnesota, right, did never fire those officers. They kept them in the service, right, because like it's a systemic, there's a systemic problem, right, with holding police accountable. The police always get the pass, and right, the community, lose their family, they, lose their dignity, and, are constantly harassed and have no actual agency that goes as far as what we're calling. So, right, that we believe, right, if members have the opportunity to elect members within the districts, they will demand more, right, because there will be a direct relationship with the people who they're electing, and also giving the board actual, authority, legal authority, once they have find evidence that their authority are final, right? The CCRB many times do give good recommendations, like as to fire, right, sometimes, but they don't actually happen, right? Those things get lower down to vacation days and loss of vacation days, and very, very minute.
And I can only imagine that there are people who probably don't support the Community Power Act. Would you be able to tell us why someone might oppose this?
Yeah, right. We have people from all sides, right? Also, progressive Democrats who don't support it because they feel that election is not the way to go, because they put the argument out there that elections are not very popular. People don't go out to vote. Right. Our opinion is very different. Right. This is a very different issue, and right, just that's something that the Democrats and should do in the city, right? Address why our elections so low, right? And I don't think it should be a reason, a good reason as to not allow a elected civilian review board. Other more conservative circles, right, say that the final authority should be given to the police commissioner, right? The community don't know anything about policing. But we also say no to that because, right, the community knows their community. They have experienced this, since decades, and right, people will make the right decision, and right, they don't have to give a, like with Eric Chauvin, right, do a weeks after weeks, theatric show. It's clearly on photo that the guy was, trying to attempting, disregarding the life of another human, right? So I'm sure that we can elect members that have that same judgment and can look at evidence and give appropriate consequences.
And has that Community Power Act, has it been passed yet? And when, if not, when do you think we would see that being passed?
No, the Community Power Act was just introduced, I would say about a month ago. Well, in March 25th, and it's bill number 2245. So essentially, what needs to happen is that since this is a public safety issue, right, it needs to be discussed and debated within the Public Safety Committee. And after that, it will go to the main floor, right, of the council, city council, and we will need 34, people in support, 34 council members in support of this bill in order, right, to veto the potential, mayor's rejection. And then after that, right, then it will go out to, since it's a charter amendment, it will go out as a referendum to all New Yorkers, and right, New Yorkers will have the final say whether we want this or not, right?
Well, Luis, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We are taking a quick break, but we will be right back.